In my previous job, I used to take the train to work every day. I live in New York, and it was way easier to take the train instead of driving through all that traffic and trying to find a parking spot. The train system is kinda complicated, but I needed to take 2 different trains to get to work and back, which took about 20 minutes total. Not too bad, honestly. I'd just stare out the window or listen to music. One morning, like usual, I headed to the train with a bunch of other people. It was crowded, like always. So, I just kept to myself, listening to music or something. When I switched from the first train to the second, I noticed some other people were doing the same. What really caught my eye was this guy in a big black coat. I remember him because he got on the same train as me, the one near my apartment. I got off the train at my stop for work, and guess what? The guy got off too. I noticed he was walking behind me all the way to my office building, but he just kept walking down the street after I went inside, so I didn't think much of it. I went about my day, totally forgetting about the guy. It wasn't until I was heading back to the train station after work that I remembered him. Why? Because I saw him again. Same clothes. Same guy. Just standing there, waiting. I'd never seen him before, but I figured maybe he worked nearby, just like me. I got on the subway when it arrived. And, of course, the guy immediately got on and sat down right next to me. I didn't know why, but something about him just really creeped me out. When we got to my stop, I decided not to get off. Instead, I stayed on the train and waited to take the next one home. I just wanted to see if this guy was actually following me. And, sure enough, every time I moved, he moved too. He was following me, no doubt about it. Eventually, I went back to the station to head home. The guy was still behind me, about 15 feet away. We both waited for the train. He sat on a bench about 20 feet from where I was sitting. The train I needed to take home arrived, but I didn't want to get on. I knew he'd follow me. The last thing I wanted was for him to follow me all the way back to my apartment. So, I just sat there, planning to let the train pass. But then, just as the doors were about to close, I got an idea. At the last second, I jumped on. The doors closed right behind me. The guy tried to force them open, but luckily, they didn't budge. I managed to get away. When I got home, I realized that guy was definitely up to something bad. I decided to avoid the train for a while to shake off that terrifying experience. I used to live in a city with a subway system, and it was my main way of getting to work for almost a whole year. I don't live in that city anymore, and I no longer have that job, but I still remember exactly what happened during that time. My work schedule was always changing, so I used the subway at different times each day. You tend to see the same people on the subway if you ride it every day, and that happened to me too. There was this one guy I started noticing about 3 months into my job. He was always on the subway, usually in the same area I was, but after a few weeks of seeing him daily, I realized something strange. No matter what time I took the subway, early in the morning, midday, or late at night, he was always there. Every time. I started thinking maybe this guy was riding the subway all day or something. I knew he didn't work at the same company as me. He usually wore a jacket or coat and a hat, so I never saw much of his hair. He wore glasses too, and I remember he had a slight beard at one point. One night, maybe the 4th or 5th time I felt like something was off, I was at my apartment, lying in bed. I wasn't asleep yet, just watching TV and messing around on my phone. It was around 11 p.m. That's when I thought I heard the front door handle turn, like someone was trying to get into my apartment. I lived alone, and my door opened outward, so I stayed in bed for a minute, listening. After a moment of silence, I figured it was nothing. But after another minute or two of hearing nothing, I decided to get up and check. When I went to the front door, no one was there. I went back to my bedroom, thinking maybe one of my neighbors had gotten the wrong door. I'd actually done that myself once before. But not long after getting back into bed, I heard a scratching noise at my bedroom window. I jumped up immediately. The sound was coming from the window, which was only about 5 feet away from me. I rushed to the window and pulled the curtains open. Standing right there was the same man I'd been seeing on the subway. He quickly turned his face away, covering it. I only saw him for about half a second, but I knew it was him. I recognized him instantly. I yelled at him, but he didn't respond. I watched him run down the street, jump into a car, and speed away from my house. After that night, I never saw him again, on the subway or anywhere else. I'm really thankful I was alert that night, and that nothing worse happened to me. Last summer, I traveled by train for the first time ever. I had to travel across several states, and after checking out some flight tickets, I realized taking the train would be a better option. I was also excited since I had never been on a train before. I packed my bag for the trip, which was only going to last a few days, and then headed to the train station. When I got there, I was early, so I had to wait for the train to arrive. There were a few other people waiting, and a few more showed up after I arrived. It was way less crowded than an airport, and definitely less packed than the subway I was used to. When the train finally arrived, we all got on and picked our seats. It was pretty much what I expected. I found a seat by the window, somewhere in the middle. About 20 minutes into the trip, I started getting weird text messages. They were from a number I didn't recognize, someone I had never talked to before. The first message said something odd. "Hey, I'm on the train with you." Before I could reply, another text came in. "You should be careful, watch your back." I texted back, asking, "Who is this?" but there was no answer. Instead, I got more messages, fast and cryptic. I started to feel a little scared. So, I blocked the number and tried to relax for the rest of the ride. I didn't get bothered again on the train, but when I got to my destination, I noticed I had several missed calls on my phone, all from numbers I didn't know. I checked my messages again, and sure enough, there were more texts. They were clearly from the same person. In one of them, they even mentioned knowing what hotel I was staying at and named the hotel. I responded again, asking, "Who are you?" But, as expected, there was no reply. Annoyed and a little freaked out, I blocked that number too, hoping that would be the end of it. Later, when I was in my hotel room, about 30 minutes after I checked in, I heard a knock on the door. My heart started racing. I mean, it could have been anyone, but I had a really bad feeling about it. I walked cautiously to the door and looked through the peephole, but no one was there. I went back to what I was doing, but then there was another knock. This time, I ran to the door, but again, whoever knocked had vanished. They must have run away fast. At that point, I grabbed all my stuff and called the hotel staff. After talking it over with them, I decided to switch hotels. And that's exactly what I did. Thankfully, once I got to the new hotel, the messages and the knocking stopped. It seemed like they hadn't figured out that I'd left. If you thought this story was scary, don't miss the camping trip episode where things get even crazier in the middle of the woods. Check out the previous video for all the details.